I want to thank you, Leda, for this invitation, and thank Stephanie and Edna to have invited me as chair of AIIC USA. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's always great to speak to young people, to students, to the future of our profession, and give a little guidance. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about AIIC in general. I am the chair for AIIC USA. But I'm going to speak sort of for the whole organization, which is worldwide, of course. The International Association of Conference Interpreters, I'm going to go over a little bit of history. I think that might be a little fun. I've always liked the way Europeans generally, when you ask them what something is, they'll tell you how it started. You know, there were two world wars. World War I, you can see on the left, World War II on the right. And after World War I, there was the Versailles Peace Conference, and actually they were doing consecutive interpreting there in English and French, and we have a blue line here for consecutive. And they would do actually pieces that lasted 1 hour. That's quite amazing. Then let's move on a little forward. The International Labor Organization in 1928 made a few serious attempts at doing actual simultaneous interpreting. But, and we will see that here in the green line above. But it was actually at the Nuremberg trials that simultaneous interpretation got going, and after World War II, and it was systematic at Nuremberg, and then at the United Nations First General Assembly in 1946, it was also in simultaneous. There was one last major international conference where they actually used consecutive in 1949, by the Food and Agriculture Organization. But pretty much from then on, all international conferences are done in simultaneous. Many of the people who were involved in this process here were based in the European nations, and they had formed several regional groups, but they did get together eventually in 1953, and that's when AIIC was created. The first international, not just international, but worldwide organization of conference interpreters. So we go back to 1953. Here's a little bit, here's our organizational chart. I'm sure that looks like a bunch of spaghetti to you. That's fine. But we did have our assembly in January of this year, and that was quite interesting. I'll be able to tell you a bit about some things that were decided at that assembly. Just wanted to show you that AIIC USA is right there at we have all these many organizations, sub-bodies, and 23 regions, and AIIC USA is one of those 23 regions. We have 3,091 interpreters, 77 languages. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about about what AIIC does. AIIC defines conditions that are necessary for interpretation to work. In other words, you need to have good sound. You need to have, generally speaking, a technician who will be there to help you. You need to have good sound. You need to be in teams of 2. You need to have time and the ability to prepare, things like that. And there's a huge effort of education to get people to understand all of these things and to implement them. Number 2, AIIC negotiates with major bodies, mainly international bodies. But anybody who asks AIIC to represent interpreters for them can have AIIC negotiate rather than having to negotiate separately with each interpreter. So AIIC negotiates for interpreters for the United Nations, European Union, and many other international bodies, and they set the conditions and make sure the conditions above mentioned are good, and they agree on rates. We also conduct research. We've been conducting research on many things, and lately the big problem, of course, has been remote and getting decent sound of sufficient quality to actually be able to do a professional job. And also the damage that can be done to interpreters' health when we don't have that. There has been something of an epidemic of acoustic shock, auditory health, and major issues with sound. And as students, I'm going to tell you something that I was told as a student: always turn the sound down to the lowest level that still enables you to get and understand the entire message, because your ears are going to need to last for many decades. So we do conduct a lot of research on that. We publish it. We work with international organizations, universities, to see what can be done. We support teaching of conference interpreting with universities. We have all kinds of programs to support universities, and we also have our own training programs. Generally speaking, these training programs are aimed at people who already are conference interpreters and have some kind of degree. So generally it's seen as continuous professional development or refresher courses. We promote a code of ethics, which is essential to the functioning. One of the main principles of that code of ethics is confidentiality. I always like to say that, associations like ours, yes, we come up with all kinds of rules, but the reason we have the rules is that we've figured out together and learned empirically that these rules are necessary for things to work. So, for example, confidentiality. If we go out and start talking to our friends about what happened in a meeting, or worse still, start putting it on social media, and clients notice that, not only are they not going to call you again, because they're going to say, hey, everything we say is getting out through these interpreters, but they're going to start frowning on interpretation in general. And that leads me to a very important principle. And that is that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. In other words, as a profession, we need to support this whole, support the group, be part of the group. And professional associations like TALS and AIIC are there exactly for that reason. We need to be that whole, which is greater than the parts. We need to be part of a team. And we have an example right there. If one of us goes out and starts blabbing about what they heard, or posting private pictures on the internet, all of us get hurt. And so this is a way for us. Professional associations are very important, playing a major role in helping us to watch over each other, look out for each other, and make sure that we're doing good by each other. So the code of ethics, and then we educate clients and the public about all of these things, and in particular, as I mentioned, the problem of bad sound, which is a huge plague today. I'd just like to go into this a little more about the research and education. We absolutely must have this level. Even Danica Seleskovic said, and this was in the 1960s, that it was a huge problem, and they were dealing simply with in-room interpretation systems. If you do not have the best quality sound, you cannot do a good job. And secondly, you may get problems to your health. There are cases in the United Nations in New York and at Parliament in Canada where people have had to take weeks off, who have had problems of balance, hearing, and even who have had to change careers because of problems of auditory health. So please be careful. We at AIIC publish many kinds of things as part of our education. Here is one that we have about how to start working in remote in a way that is effective. And then we work with the International Standards Organization, ISO, where, as you can see here, going back to, this one goes back to 2017, the standards for interpreting equipment, and then here, standards for interpreting services. This work has brought together the clients, the interpreters, everyone interested, and they've worked out standards. And these standards are very important for all of the above reasons, to be able to function as interpreters and to be able to protect our health, etc. And very recently, this is quite nice, in 2022, there is a new ISO standard for interpreting services, conference interpreting requirements, and recommendations. So this work with the ISO has been quite important, I'd say. We I've already mentioned this. We work with universities and others to educate. We have two major groups. There's the agreements sector, and that's the one I mentioned where, for example, the United Nations, European Union, etc., prefer to say, okay, we will sign up with AIIC and sign an agreement, and that way everything is done much more smoothly than if we have to hire a huge HR department to do it individually. And we want to be on good terms and have the best service possible. So we decided, and we are very big as the UN or the EU, so we will be part of the agreements sector. And then there's the non-agreement sector, which is all of us private freelancers like I am. If you would like to apply to AIIC, there are several requirements. You have to have a minimum of 150 days as a conference interpreter. You need to be sponsored by an existing AIIC member with whom you've worked over the last 3 years in each of your language pairs. And you have to agree to work by AIIC's professional standards and agree and respect AIIC's code of ethics, which we will be looking at in a moment. And as I said, these codes, these rules, these requirements are part of what's actually necessary for the profession to progress. And they've shown their worth down through the years. Anyway, I do encourage you to join AIIC when you can, when you become a conference interpreter with enough experience to do so, and we will be very happy to welcome you. There have been several links, like the one you can see here, and you can't click on them here. So what I'm going to do is put them in the chat, so you'll have a whole series of links there. Thank you very much.